of our IPA convention and exhibition. And this morning, we are coming to the plenary session 2 that will last until 11. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished panelists in this session will talk about the role and commercialization of CCS, CCUS in meeting Indonesia's net zero target. First of all, we will have this short video.
Peran dan komersialisasi CCS CCUS dalam mencapai target net zero Indonesia. Carbon Capture Storage atau CCS dan Carbon Capture Utilization and Storage atau CCUS merupakan upaya yang dapat dilakukan oleh industri hulu migas untuk mengurangi emisi gas rumah kaca pada kegiatan operasi migas dan industri-industri lain. Kegiatan CCS terdiri dari penangkapan karbon dioksida dari sumber penghasil emisi, proses transportasi, dan penyimpanan karbon dioksida pada zona target sumur injeksi. Sedangkan pada CCUS, terdapat tambahan tahapan berupa pemanfaatan karbon. Bagi Indonesia, CCUS juga memiliki peran ganda. Selain mendukung target penurunan emisi, teknologi tersebut juga dapat dimanfaatkan untuk meningkatkan produksi migas melalui teknik Enhanced Oil Recovery atau Enhanced Gas Recovery. Berdasarkan laporan IHS Markit, setidaknya ada 8 proyek CCS CCUS potensial di tanah air. Proyek-proyek tersebut berada pada tahapan perencanaan, studi kelayakan, dan Final Investment Decision atau FID. Sebagian proyek CCS CCUS tersebut berada di sejumlah wilayah kerja migas, seperti Gundi, Sukowati, dan Tangguh. Ketiganya memiliki potensi penyimpanan karbon dioksida sebanyak 41 juta ton. Namun, proyek-proyek CCS CCUS di Indonesia tersebut memerlukan kepastian hukum, kemudahan berusaha, dan insentif fiskal untuk menarik investasi. Sebagai langkah awal, Direktorat Jenderal Minyak dan Gas Bumi telah membentuk tim untuk menyusun peraturan pelaksanaan guna mendukung perkembangan CCS CCUS di Indonesia. Ruang lingkup regulasi ini bertujuan mengatur kegiatan CCS CCUS di lingkup aspek teknis, bisnis, dan hukum, mencakup proses penangkapan hingga pemanfaatan karbon dari dan untuk wilayah kerja migas. Tantangan utama penerapan CCS CCUS adalah membuat biaya teknologi menjadi lebih terjangkau, sehingga menarik minat investor dan proyek CCS CCUS dapat dikembangkan secara komersial. Dengan demikian, masih diperlukan peraturan tambahan lainnya untuk dapat menjawab tantangan yang ada, agar CCS CCUS dapat memenuhi perannya untuk mengurangi emisi karbon baik di dalam maupun di luar wilayah kerja migas. Pada akhirnya, proyek CCS CCUS diharapkan dapat dikembangkan secara komersial sehingga dapat mengurangi emisi karbon dan juga mempertahankan produksi migas.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence this plenary session 2. And we kindly remind you about the Q&A by scanning the QR code on the big screen with your handphones. You are ready to type the questions you might have in the question box in your gadget. Ladies and gentlemen, our session moderator, Bapak Wahyu Budiarto, IPA Board. Bapak Wahyu Budiarto assumes his role as Chevron Indonesia Country Manager on 1st March 2022. He is also president of Chevron Rapak Limited, Chevron Ghana Limited, and Chevron Makassar Limited since February 2021. Bapak Wahyu Budiarto had worked in all Chevron major locations in Indonesia and as well as in Kuwait and Houston. Bapak Wahyu Budiarto, you have the floor.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. First of all, thank you very much for choosing this session as your first session in the second day of the convention. I think you will be grateful that you actually choose to attend this early session. Yesterday, Pak Sugeng Suparwoto, the chairman of Commission 7, started his speech with a song, Galang Rambu Anarki. So don't worry, I'm not going to sing that because I know usually I'm specialized if I'm singing at the end of the party because everybody will leave the room. So I'm not going to sing this morning. But that song is actually by Iwan Fals from 1982. So, and it tells the story of how galau, a father talking to his son, related to energy. So I don't know if, what is the English word for galau? Galau is probably somewhere between broken-hearted and not being able to do anything about it. And that is related to actually, he was talking to his son about the challenges in his life. He's an ordinary man in his life because of the price of fuel at that time, 1982. And 40 years later, Pak Sugeng sang that song. It's still very relevant that our society demands that energy has to be affordable. So that's the main key, is that energy, whatever it is, has to be affordable. And then, so that's kind of the lesson in me when I was listening to Pak Sugeng yesterday. Yeah, it's still valid that everybody, society really requires that energy has to be affordable. So if it is too expensive, it's going to be very challenging for the ordinary. And that's not only in Indonesia, actually. In the summer in the US, everybody talk about $5 gallon of gas and how going to ruin the economic. So it's a common things across the world. Second thing that I want to pay attention to is the event in Europe. Certainly related to the crisis they're having or going to have maybe in the winter due to the supply of gas from Russia that's going to be challenged. So that's another lesson, is that energy has to be reliable. So those two things are very critical for our industry. How can we be affordable and reliable? And that's actually is the competitive advantage of our industry compared to other form of energy. However, society moves, the world changes. There is a third component that's coming in very strong. The last few years, maybe many years for some, but the last 2 years certainly all over the world, that energy has to be green, energy has to be clean. So that's the third component, that how can we be reliable, affordable, at the same time also lower carbon. So that is the main challenge for us as our industry, because it has to be reliable and affordable, and that's our competitive advantage. But then it only works for us if we can be lower carbon, because the world demands that. That's where CCS, CCUS will be coming in. I think, I truly believe that oil and gas will be here for a long, long time, because the alternative might be lower carbon, but the other two things might not be reliable, might not be affordable. So this is like not like a sofa here, but like a three-legged stool, kursi dengan kaki tiga. So if it's a little bit not balanced, that's probably okay, as long as not a person like me who's sitting in. Then if you fall down, then it'll be tough. But if it is completely in balance, it could be, we can move to lower carbon all the way, but then it won't be reliable and affordable for sure. So that's where CCS, CCUS is coming in, is how can we make our industry still reliable and affordable, but at the same time with lower carbon, because that's the world expects that. CCUS, CCS will help us in places where it's hard to decarbonize. Of course, we can move everything into renewable because it's going to be lower carbon, but then the affordability and the reliability might not be there. So I truly believe that oil and gas, as long as we can be meeting the requirements of the world of being lower carbon, we will be here to stay. for quite a long time. And today, we are very fortunate to have 4 distinguished panels discussing CCS, CCUS, and actually the title is the role of and commercialization of CCS, CCUS in meeting Indonesian net zero target. And we have one panel from the government, Pak Director General will be here, and we also have one panel speaker from the largest operator of oil and gas in Indonesia, who is applying this as well. Pak Budiman will join us, and then we have one panel from the largest oil and gas company in the world. Bu Tracy will join us, and then the last one is actually, to me, is the most critical one, because people in Nigeria said that it takes a village to raise a child, and in this space, it does take a village. Takes everybody collaboration to be able to meet the requirement. And Matsuda-san will be representing JETRO, who is really facilitating, working together, collaboration all over the world to make net zero being attainable. So without further ado, I'll introduce the first speaker. Actually, this is someone who does not need introduction in this room. Pak Director General, Professor Tutuko Aryaji, assumed the position in November 2020. He was born in Solo, and he is a SMA 1 best student, graduate from Solo. Pak Abdul was very happy I mentioned that, Pak Tutuko. And he went to school and then teach, and professor in the ITB, Institut Teknologi of Bandung, in petroleum engineering, mining and petroleum engineering. But this is another important one. He did his master and PhD from that best school in the world, in College Station, called Texas A&M, Giga Megis. So he actually was there in 96, finishing his PhD, and then returned to campus to be the professor in ITB. And this space is really his expertise as well. So let me invite Pak Professor to the stage. The second speaker is Pak Budiman Parhusip. He is the CEO of Pertamina Hulu Energy, the upstream of Pertamina. He has 35 years of experience in different companies managing oil and gas industry. And he also went to Bandung Institute of Technology. And he got his master from MBA from University of Southern California, Trojan. The Trojan is doing very well this year in football. So I'm an Egy, so Coach Saban always accuse us that we bought our players. Actually, Trojan is smarter. They bought the coach, and then the players come with the coach. So Trojan is doing very well this year. He started in Arco Indonesia, and then moved to BP Indonesia, and Rukun Raja, and then in Gihon Telecommunication, and since June 2020, is the CEO of PHE. Please give a big round of applause to Pak Budiman. Invite him to the stage. Okay, the third speaker is Ibu Tracy Lotion. She is Vice President Asia Pacific of ExxonMobil Low Carbon Solution Station in Singapore. She is driven to transform the energy industry to create more diverse, inclusive, and sustainable energy future. recognized as Petroleum Economist Energy Leader of the Year in 2020. Has a variety of leadership experience, including in the upstream project development, acquisition, divestment, natural gas, LNG, power, CCS, and hydrogen. Joined in ExxonMobil in UK in '98. She was assigned in Brussels, Antwerp, Houston, and currently in Singapore. And she went to school in, get her BSc from University College London, and MBA from London School of Business. I'm not sure if they have a football in London School of Business, so I cannot say any football joke. But please give a big round of applause to Ibu Tracy. And the fourth speaker, this is the one that I think is the most critical I mentioned, is the catalyst, is the facilitator for everyone to work together. So the speaker is Matsuda-san, Matsuda Akihisa. He is a VP Director of Japan External Trade Organization. He's been in Jakarta office since October 2021, and he works to promote Japanese companies' activity to cooperate on net zero target, such as introducing renewable energy and EV, enhancing energy efficiency and resource efficiency. And he works in the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, currently stationed in Jakarta as the lead for JETRO. He holds a master's degree in chemistry, so he's a scientist, from a Graduate School of Science in Tohoku University in Japan. Please give a big round of applause to Matsuda-san. Sign here that the time for my time is almost up. I talk too much usually. I'm an old guy, so I like to tell stories. But without further ado, I will provide Professor with the stage, either in the seat or in the podium. You have 15 minutes, Professor.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So I will start with the current condition of Indonesia about the emission. Next slide, please. Yeah. This is the potential storage of CO2. One of our institution, Lemigas, did study and end up with these numbers of CO2 storage potential about 2 in oil gas depleted reservoirs and 10 gigaton in saline aquifer. And that's the maps showing the location. The red and the blue is the depleted oil reservoirs and depleted gas reservoirs respectively. But Exxon also did study, according to Exxon, is much more higher. That is 8 gigatons CO2 in saline aquifers. Another study by Rystad, even more higher than that. So we will do again to refine these studies, and hopefully we will end up with better numbers. Next. And we're trying to identify the emissions from the upstream to the downstream. The left side is the upstreams, so the peak is about 30 million ton CO2, and the downstream, it's many assumptions there, but we're trying to get the best values, the best estimation, and the total is about 44. The peak is in 44 million ton CO2 in the year 2030. Why is that? Because we're trying to pursue the 1 million barrel oil per day and 12 VSFD in that year. So that's the bottom picture is the profile of the emission. So the total emission in year 2060 is about 1.4 or 1.14 gigaton. Then, next, according to IEA, STEPS and ABS, STEPS means stated policy scenarios, the emission is much more higher as depicted in this figure. On the left side is STEPS and the right side is ABS, announced pledges scenario. So we still consider these numbers as well. So consideration that this will be very big in year 2045, the peaks, and we in this particular event we're trying to focus on the industry. So industry will be about 200 million ton, yeah, from the industries, and part of that sure our industry. So the ABS scenario is very important in this case. So we're trying to really learn, study what is the ABS scenario and how we can achieve it. Next. Next, yeah, okay. Then understanding that problems in the future, we gather many institutions and coordinated by the Center of Excellence of kind of carbon neutral in Indonesia, and we define the concepts, the scope, and also eventually the draft of regulation, ministerial regulation that we are proposing now, laying the foundation of the theoretical foundation and also the oil and gas industry condition. We're proposing these concepts. So we should support the development of CCS and CCUS. Second is should we focus on the oil and gas working area, because it will be conducted by oil and gas contractor and SKK Migas and Dijen Migas from us. So, but open source, open CO2 source from other sources like industries still can be accommodated through this mechanism. Then we should consider the technical aspects based on applicable regulation. So we studied a lot from other countries such as Norway and Australia and other countries that have already some regulation standards and good engineering practices and site characteristics. So we did a lot of studies on that. And then we mapping the opportunities for the CCS monetization. Again, we also coordinate with the Ministry for Maritime and Investment Affairs, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and some international institution. So this draft of ministerial regulation has been discussed several months since August last year. Next. And this is the scope. Start from technical aspects, and then business scenario, legal aspects, economic aspects. The technical aspects covering the capture, transport, injection, storage, monitoring, measurement, reporting, and verification. This is important, MRV. And then based on the reference, standard reference. And then business scenario should be based on the current condition oil and gas practices. That is the contracts, like PSC contract. And then the sources, not only from oil and gas, but also from other industries through B2B with oil and gas contractors. And the aspects, the proposal should be part of POD. So if it is not mandatory, but if companies want to do CCUS, they have to follow, they have to put the programs into a POD. And then and economic aspects, we are opening to potential third parties funding. Even though in this ministerial regulation, there is no commerciality. Yeah, there is no carbon trading. It's not there because this is within our area of jurisdiction. So we do not propose, we do not have articles about commercialization, but just to manage the CCS safely and able to do further business. Next. So this is what, where, who, how, when. So the CO2 source can be from outside, as I mentioned before. And let me mention one of the important thing. How? Yeah, how? I'll mention how. So this CO2 source capture applicable law and regulation. So we already coordinated with Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Okay, and then other sources from outside this industry should cooperate with you, with the oil companies and SK Migas, but it can be done. Okay. And then the monitoring on the very bottom on the right, after PUD approval until 10 years after the injection closure. So there is an obligation after 10 years after the PUD approval until after injection. Next. This is the scheme after approval. So should be put in as part of PUD, and then SK Migas will evaluate. This is a regular mechanism, and then the minister will approve. So after the approval, contractors shall perform the FAVT procedure for the CCS, CCUS. And then if needed, contractor through SK Migas or PPMA could also propose amendment of the PSC. Okay, next. And the challenges is the cost, we know that. So we're trying to work with you all and other institutions to work on this, particularly in technology development, partnership, CCS, US, hubs, strategy, concepts, and incentives. So currently the price, if we can estimate, is roughly, the capture cost is the highest one. It's about 73%. Okay. On the bottom right of the figure, tell us that if you have field that you will not store the CO2 in that field, you can store in other fields. If that field is not yours, then you will manage to do that with us, with SK Migas and Dijen Migas. Can be done still. Next. And this is some list of some of the projects, but most of them are in a very early stage, like a study or pre-FS. The most advanced one is from number one is Tango. It's currently is the feed preparation, and hopefully will be on stream on year 2026. Thank you very much for the attention, and hopefully it is fruitful for you.
Terima kasih Pak Dirjen. Thank you very much for concise presentation on the new regulation. Certainly, Pak Dirjen discussed the why, why we need this, and as well as the how. And I capture a couple of nuggets there. Certainly, that it is focusing on oil and gas on operation with potentially even our other resources through a B2B mechanism. So certainly, thank you, Pak, and we'll hold the question. And I think in this panel, just like in the previous panel, please use the code. Correct, Mas? Read the code to ask the question later on. Capture that, and certainly we'll go through all the four panelists and then have the question and answer session later on. And the second speaker, as I mentioned, is Pak Budiman. Floor is yours, Pak.
Thank you very much, Pak Wahyu. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning for all of us. And thank you for this opportunity for me to discuss what we have been doing right now in Pertamina Hulu Energy in the carbon capture, utilization and storage, and also carbon capture and storage. I will discuss later on about our sustainability commitment and our program on the CCUS, CCS projects, and also how we are studying these projects with our partners. First of all, I know that all of you, of course, know PHC very well. But anyway, Pertamina Hulu Energy is the upstream subholding of Pertamina, which manages all of the operations of the oil and gas upstream businesses of Pertamina in Indonesia and overseas. In Indonesia, we operate in almost all areas from the most western part of Indonesia to the most eastern part until Papua. And we exist in almost all areas in Indonesia. And we have also operation overseas, such as in Algeria, and with our partners with Exxon in Iraq, and also in several countries. In Indonesia, PHE operates more than 60% of all the blocks that in operation of oil and gas in our country. So we understand that PHE has a very important role in providing energy, in providing oil and gas to the country. Just like Pak Wahyu mentioned, that we need to make sure that our production is stable and we can keep to increase our production, also our reserves. It's not easy, it's very challenging, and we'll need to work together with all of the stakeholders in our industries. Next. Okay, PHE is very committed to the sustainability, to realizing our sustainability in environment, social and governance, in carrying out best practices in our businesses. And to carry out this ESG commitment, PHE has established policies and also a committee. The committee chaired by the CEO with the members of board of directors and vice president. And PHE also refers to various international guidelines and standards. And we have ambition to be a leading and reputable global energy company and to be recognized as an environment-friendly company, socially responsible company, good governance company. In the national level, PHE has a proven track record, especially in the achievement of PROPER. As we all know, PROPER is a public disclosure on environment compliances. And PHE has a very good achievement that we achieved 9 gold awards and 24 green awards in 2022. And PHE also has been registered in the United Nations Global Compact in June 2022. And we are committed to the 10 principles of the UNGC to carry out our strategies and operations. Next. Now, I think all of you know that about this energy mix. Despite the net zero commitment of our country, that the demand of energy of Indonesia is increasing around 2.1% every year. And it also that the demand of fossil fuel is still increasing. However, from this energy mix, we can see that the percentage of coal is decreasing, while the percentage of gas in this energy mix is increasing. So this is showing that gas will play a very important role as the energy transition in the future towards the greener energy in 2050, 2060. And PHE has a strategy on this energy transition. We promote gas development in our portfolio. We have several gas projects, and recently we are successfully have a gas on stream in our important project Jambaran Tiung Biru, close to the Banyu Urip. And I should thank ExxonMobil here, which help us, support us on developing this Jambaran Tiung Biru project. And also we have several gas projects right now, and in developing our field in Mahakam, Sanga-Sanga, and other areas in Indonesia. And also we are very active on decarbonization program. We are working on energy efficiency and also gas recovery, and also implementing and constructing low carbon power in our working areas. We are now constructing with our partners on the developing 25 megawatts solar panel in Rokan. So this is a very important project and showing our commitment on this decarbonization. And also we are working with partners on studying and implementation plan of CCUS and CCS. We see that CCUS and CCS as a very potential new business for PHE. And we are working, as I said again, we are working with our partners on evaluating this potential new business for PHE. Next slide. Now, Pak Tutuka already mentioned about this, that from this slide we could see that in the red circle, which are the industrial clusters in Sumatra, Java, and Kalimantan. There are some industrial clusters over there that produce CO2, and of course this emission will be increasing in the future. PHE has a very unique position on this because we have working areas with depleted reservoirs close to these industrial clusters. And we can use this depleted reservoir later on as the place for injecting the CO2 from this industrial cluster. And our estimate of storage potential from the depleted reservoir is around 2,800 million tons. So this is a very good opportunity to us to work with all of the stakeholders to use this our depleted reservoirs to have a CO2 hub later on in the future. Next. Now, we already see before from Pak Tutuka about the progress of all of the studies conducted in Indonesia on the CCUS and CCS. And to build our CCUS roadmap, Pertamina has been working with international oil companies which have the experience on low carbon solutions. We are conducting several joint studies with our partners on evaluating and studying these CCUS and CCS. In the green color there, those are the fields that we are doing the studies and close to finalization. The study is very close to the finalization. We are studying in Gundi for enhanced gas recovery, CCUS and enhanced gas recovery, and in Sukowati, CCUS enhanced oil recovery, and in Jatibarang, we will have a kind of injectivity test, half and puff, that we plan to start this injecting the CO2 in this year, by the end of this year. And also we are studying in Ramba. So these are the joint study that we are doing right now with our partners. And in the blue over there is also we are initiating the study to see the CCS potential of this field. We are collaborating with JAPEX, Janus, ExxonMobil, JOGMEC, Chiyoda, and also Mitsui. So we actively evaluating our field on the potential of the CCUS and CCS. Next slide. Now, in order to ensure the economics and commercial viability, we carefully look after the technical and commercial value chains. It is important for us to understand the technicality of this CCUS and CCS. We prioritize the development of enhanced oil recovery and enhanced gas recovery to obtain incremental gain of hydrocarbon. And again, we are work with our partner with experienced CCUS and CCS. Pak Tutuka already mentioned about all the regulations, and it is very important that we need to have a foundation that we all understand, as such that it will help enable us to make this CCUS, CCS technically and commercially viable, because we are working on the PSC terms and conditions. And the business model is also very important. And partnership with the company which has a green fund, we need to have a cheaper source of fund. And we are working with some Japanese company, for example, for the joint credit mechanism, which of course we will hear later on from Matsuda-san. And again, for the PSC fiscal term regulation, we hope that we can have more attractive fiscal terms on these projects to help us to make this project more economic, because the investment of this CCUS, CCS is quite heavy. So we need to make sure that the treatment in the PSC and also some attractive fiscal terms which enable us to develop these CCS, CCUS projects. Next. And we have several key initiatives to unlock these CCUS, CCS businesses, which are, commercially. Again, we need to have to discuss with our partners about the model of this partnership. Yeah, we are in the early stage on this partnership. How we treat or we work together with the partners, and how is the treatment of the PSC in this commercial model. And we need also to identify other CO2 applications to help us it's possible that we can have a new revenue streams from this CCUS, CCS project. And to lower down or optimize the development costs, we need to evaluate how we can use or leverage our existing infrastructure, and how we can use our existing infrastructure as optimum as possible to lower down the investment cost. Again, regulatory, such as Pak Tutuka already mentioned, we need to have more certainty on the regulation and on the PSC terms on this CCUS, CCS project. Capital is very important. We need to work out and start the conversation with the financiers on the CCUS, so that we can have a commercial project on this CCUS, CCS. So these are the things that we are now working, discussing with all of our partners and all of the possible financiers on our projects. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Big round of applause for Pak Budiman. Terima kasih Pak Budiman who has shared the journey of Pertamina in looking at this opportunity. Certainly not only to make it lower carbon, but Pak Budiman also shared that the dream of is going to be a business stream as well, something that we can all aspire to. So appreciate that. And our third speaker is Ibu Tracy from ExxonMobil. Yeah, stage is yours, Bu.
Hello, good morning everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today with this distinguished panel and really talk about commercialization of carbon capture and storage. It's an important time to really activate this business, and collaboration is increasing, market forces are growing, and government support is really coming through greater and greater across the world. So it's importantly time. So a pleasure to be able to talk to you today a little bit more about what ExxonMobil's doing in the carbon capture and storage, as well as talk about how do we activate this further and what can we do in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia to really activate this business. So I'm Tracy Lothian. I'm based in Singapore, which is where we're really growing a low carbon solutions company, which is part of our ExxonMobil set of companies, really looking at how do we commercialize carbon capture and storage, and why is hydrogen an enabler? And I'll talk about that a little bit more in my talk. I'll start with a picture. This is actually a bridge, the Fred Hartman Bridge, going back to Texas, where a number of people studied. It's where one of our first large-scale CCS projects is. So I'll reference that throughout my talk because I think it's good to bring forward an example of how things and projects can be brought forward at scale. But first, to talk about the importance of carbon capture and storage, and a few numbers here. This isn't the first time ExxonMobil's been looking at carbon capture and storage. It's something that we've actually been doing in our business for over 30 years now, and we're the world number one in terms of the amount of CO2 that we've been able to sequester, and today we have a 9 million tons per annum capacity for injection. Just to put that into perspective, that's equivalent to 150 million trees annually, or taking 2 million passenger vehicles off the road. So it can be sizable, and that number we envisage is going to grow significantly in the years ahead. I'll jump next to the statistic on the potential, the CCS potential market of 4 trillion, which is obviously a huge number. And this is something that's supported by studies. If I reference the IPCC and various experts looking at how do we get to that net zero, the lower than 2 degrees scenario, you end up with a huge market potential for CCS, as it's one of the real enablers to allow us to get to that net zero position by 2050. It's going to take a significant amount of storage. We're going to need numerous projects around the world, and some reference anywhere between 8 to 10 gigatons of storage projects will be needed to support such a business over time. So the question is, how do we use this industry experience and our own corporate experience to really activate this and move it forward in many countries in the world, and in particular, what can we do here in Indonesia? To jump into economics, when we talk about the commercials, it needs to hang together. For it to grow at that scale, it will need to be a business model. There'll need to be a mechanism, a revenue mechanism that works in order to activate this at scale. So the graph I've depicted here is perhaps an illustration of what some of the other speakers have mentioned. Is to activate this, you need to find high concentration CO2. And this chart shows why that is. The higher the concentration, so the 95% there on the left, the lower the cost to capture. And that's really important when you think of the value chain. A lot of the costs are in that capture of CO2. There are other forms. If on the other side is direct air capture, which is a dilute stream from the air, the costs of that need to come down with technology, with innovation, and actually implementing projects. But you'll see there's a big gap between the higher concentration and some of those more innovative, newer technologies. So it's really about activation in the first instance to bring forward projects, and that's why focusing on where there is higher concentration CO2 in industrial clusters is extremely important. Policy support is also important, and on this chart you will see there's a line on here with the US 45Q. For those that don't know, there's been a significant movement in the policy support in the US to really support carbon capture and storage. And so that line there represents a tax credit for units of carbon that are abated from US government policy. And the reason that is important is really in this activation phase, these projects need to be supported by a number of mechanisms, by customers and by governments working together to find out what those activation points are. Now, some of you have probably heard a lot of talk of hydrogen with CCS, and so I wanted to explain to everybody that hasn't really put that part together, a simple illustration around why hydrogen is important to supporting a lot of these value chains today. So on the left, when you have hydrocarbons and you burn them, for example, in combined power gas turbines, you end up with a dilute stream, lower concentration streams of CO2. If you use hydrogen, so moving to the diagram on the right, we have a blue hydrogen plant here, for example. By the creation of hydrogen, if you're using gas as a fuel for that process, you end up with a much higher concentration stream that is a lower cost to capture. So the more that we can activate commercially hydrogen use in countries or in projects, the lower the cost to capture. And obviously if you have that storage site located close by, then you can create low carbon hydrogen as a low carbon fuel, as a future fuel. So that's something that we're very much focused on too. And you'll see the number at the bottom, the hydrogen potential. If you again take some of the IPCC numbers, we project hydrogen to have a huge market potential going forward and it to be a real enabler for CCS growth. This is the US Gulf Coast, so quite far from here, but to illustrate the concept around hubs. And the blue circles represent those emission zones. And around this area, obviously it's a prolific oil and gas basin area. There is a lot of storage in close proximity. And so they are two really big factors in terms of carbon capture and enablement, and a great location to really have a large-scale project. So this is one of the first larger-scale projects that we announced, our Houston hub, which is also working together with our Baytown facilities for a hydrogen project. And so this is something that we see is very scalable and something that can really reduce emissions near term. This is a little bit more about the Baytown Blue Hydrogen Project, as we call it. It's going to be a world-scale hydrogen production facility using carbon capture and storage in the pore space in the US Gulf Coast area to really abate emissions at scale and work in our existing facilities as well as work with other customers, both on the hydrogen side and on the carbon capture and storage side. So I've used the US Gulf Coast as an example and to bring out the key enablers around the concentration of CO2 being important, other revenue mechanisms also being important, such as the hydrogen value chain. So to bring it together with perhaps a longer list of enablers, this chart really thinks about what is needed in that policy support area to enable CCS. And it's excellent to listen to the panel here and just see how many of these are being put in place in Indonesia such that we can bring forward commercial business here too and really grow that. That's why at the top it's really visible government support for CCS, which we have here. It's important that it's supported, that it's recognised and understood as something that we've done elsewhere. This isn't a completely new technology, it's just something that really needs to be scaled up in order to address the net zero 2050 challenge. Part of those policies need to be durable, they need to be reliable and long-term such that they provide those financial incentives to bring these projects forward. A number of these points in the next section around the regulatory and legal environment have been touched upon, which is excellent because we all need to work together to make sure we have the right regulatory and legal mechanisms such that this is a business that we can understand, we can regulate. You'll see the acronym again, the MRV, Measurement, Reporting and Verification Standards. That's crucially important that we understand this part of it and we are able to measure what we're doing and what we're abating and to make sure that this is safe and durable and permanent. There's a lot of other important mechanisms that we can hopefully draw from our other projects and help bring together the right regulations, working with governments and working with partners in order to really fulfill this list and a much longer list of activities in that regulatory space. When you think of the international collaboration point, it's never been more important than where we are in Indonesia. In terms of activation of large-scale CCS, we believe that that's going to come from both domestic use as well as international use of the pore space to really make it scalable. And so international collaboration on how do you actually do that? What are the mechanisms that allow countries in order to share those carbon abatements? What is going to be the policy that's going to support that cross-border carbon movement? Will be crucially important as to how this takes place. As well as public support for CCS. It's something that some people haven't heard of. It's something that we, as an industry, need to talk about more as being one of the vehicles to address the current climate crisis and to have the narrative of why that is, why it's there today and it's scalable and something that we can use to abate existing emissions as well as really activate that hydrogen economy that we talk about. So working out ways both locally and internationally to get that public support will be a very important part of the projects that we put together. This is my final slide, and it was to really illustrate that we're looking very much in this region of the world and in Indonesia, as well as projects internationally. And there's a lot of learnings that can be extracted from what we're doing in our existing facilities. So on the map there, the ones that already make up that 9 million tons are in the US, in La Barge in Wyoming, as well as in Qatar in the Middle East and in Gorgon in Australia. The rest of the names here are projects that we're actively working today. So I talked about the Houston hub. We also have a complex in our Canadian affiliate in Strathcona. You'll see a lot of activity in Europe, in particular in Northwest Europe. There's supportive policy in the UK that's really activating a number of those projects within the UK, working again with industry and government to make those a reality. And then if we come back down to this area in the world, we do envisage over time that carbon capture and storage will become a network in Asia Pacific of a series of emission hubs and sequestration sites. And to really make a sizable impact on the emissions in the region, we will need multiple stores in lots of different countries, and we will need that international collaboration and ability to move CO2 and understand how that impacts various countries' targets. And importantly, it will require those commercial mechanisms to grow and for people to increasingly use carbon capture and storage as a means of abatement. So you'll see lots of countries listed here where we're actively working on some projects, different stages of projects. The most advanced in the region is the one we have in the Gippsland Basin, where we've been operating for a number of decades, and we have a great understanding of the subsurface to allow us to activate a CCS project there. And we're obviously working very closely in Indonesia with our partners to find the right storage locations and activate CCS here as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Tracy, who shared the journey for ExxonMobil. And certainly I think one area that she showed, the potential in the future, $4 trillion. Wow. And kalau orang Indonesia bilangnya itu uang semua loh itu. 4 trillion is all money and it's all US dollar, not 4 trillion rupiah, which is a bit different, but so the opportunity is really there. And I think you also share that how the industry, what the industry needs in order to capitalize on that opportunity, which include, you know, funding high concentration to make it business viable. And certainly the regs and legs is a critical part of the policy. And the hydrogen, blue hydrogen is another one. How can we use different stream to optimize? And then I think the last one that I captured that is critical is the cooperation. Again, all three speakers have discussed about the how it takes a village to work on this, because everybody needs to pull together. By the way, just a plug, the Gorgon is partnership with Chevron. So I just want to plug my company. Gorgon that she mentioned is with Chevron. The fourth speaker is Matsuda-san. He's from JETRO, and he's going to discuss how to bring the partnership together. So, floor is yours, Matsuda-san.
Selamat pagi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, Professor Tutuka Ariyati, Director General Oil and Gas, Bapak Budiman Partek, CEO of Pertamina Full Energy, Ibu Tracy Rodian, Vice President Asia Pacific Low Carbon Solutions, ExxonMobil, and Bapak Wahyu Budianto, IPA Board. Thank you very much again for inviting me this very important event, and it is very good opportunity for me to introduce Japanese government policies as well as Japanese companies' effort to contribute to Indonesian net zero target. Next slide, please. I'm Matsuda Akisa, Vice President Director of Japan External Trade Organization, and not only JETRO, I'm working as a secretariat of the Task Force on Carbon Neutrality of Jakarta Japan Club, which is a Japanese Chamber of Commerce in Indonesia, and I'm facilitating the Japanese companies' effort contributing Indonesian net zero goal. Next slide, please. Yes, maybe some people in this hall is quite new to JETRO, Japan External Trade Organization. It's a government-related organization in Japan, and there is a very strong global network. There are 70 overseas offices around the world, as well as 50 domestic offices in Japan. Our main mission is promote trade and investment between Japan and other countries. And in Indonesia, we are working very hard to cooperate with Indonesian government and companies. Next slide, please. Yes, let me reiterate the importance and expectation to the CCS and the CCUS around the world, as well as Indonesia. So next slide. This graph is IEA's net zero scenario published last year. According to this scenario, the electricity sector shown in blue will be net zero in 2030s, and in 2050, globally, the emission from electricity sector should be negative because other sectors, buildings, transport, industry sector is a kind of hard to abate sectors. Next slide, please. Yes, this slide shows the importance of the CCUS in the fossil fuel combustion. In a net zero scenario in 2050, the majority of the fossil fuel combustion should be paired with CCUS. Next slide. Yes, this slide shows roadmaps to how to reduce the carbon dioxide emission. And as shown in this graph, after 2030 to 2050, CCUS becomes more and more important. From the next slide, I prepared the situation in Indonesia, but it was already explained previous speakers. So let's skip to the slide 11. Yep. Yes, next. Next. One more. One more, please. Yes. Let me explain the Japanese policy on net zero emission. Yes, next slide. In 2020, former Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide announced the Japanese net zero target in 2050. And former Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Mr. Kajiyama, also announced the green growth strategy, not only reducing the carbon emission, but also enhancing the green industry in Japan. Next slide. This slide shows the target to the 2050 goals. In Japan, electricity and non-electricity sectors emission are also reduced dramatically using energy savings, renewable energy, of course, CCS and CCUS, or carbon offset. Next slide, please. Yes, in the Japanese benchmark energy policy document, the Strategic Energy Plan, CCS is stipulated as follows. For example, practical use of CCUS in the society will be promoted, and the introduction of CCS by 2030 on the premise of CCS commercialization. And the CCUS is assumed scale of the CCUS is about 100 million tons paired with a fossil fire plant generation every year. Next slide. Japanese government are not only reducing carbon dioxide emission in Japan, but also enhancing the international cooperation, especially with Asian countries. Last year, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry announced the project Asia Energy Transition Initiative, so-called AT. This initiative consists of 5 pillars. The first one is supporting formulating energy transition roadmaps in Asian countries. And the next one, considering the Asian transition finance to induce the finance to the green sector. The third one is financial support to the renewable energy and LNG or CCUS and other green projects. Number 4, the technology development and research and development utilizing the green innovation filed by Japanese government. The last one is a human resource development or knowledge sharing and rule making on decarbonization technologies such as Asia CCUS network. I will explain later. Next slide, please. This Asia Energy Transition Initiative, AT, is now evolving to the new concept, Asia Zero Emission Committee. Last January, Prime Minister Kishida announced the concept of the Asia Zero Emission Committee. He said that this Asia Zero Emission Committee would become a platform to advance efforts such as international joint investment on development of zero emission technologies and hydrogen infrastructure, joint financing, standardization of related technologies, and establishment of Asian emission trading market. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier, Japanese government leading the work with the Asian partners in the forum of the Asia CCUS network. This network, this framework is composed of member countries from ASEAN and Asian countries, as well as the Australian, US, and the academia and financial institutions and industries. The mission of this forum is promoting the knowledge sharing and conducting research studies and holding a capacity building or training workshop in Asian countries. Next slide, please. This slide shows the roadmap of the Asia CCUS network. Now we just kicked off this network, and after 2025, the development of project and the business environment, and after 2030, the decarbonizing Asia economic zone with a focus on CCUS. Next slide, please. It's not only Asia CCUS network, we are collaborating with other countries, especially Indonesia. Indonesia is the #1 partner on this sector. We started some joint project with Indonesian, and also we have joint project with Australia and the US. Next slide, please. I will explain about the joint crediting mechanism, so-called JCM. This is a framework utilizing the Japanese technologies and reducing carbon emission in partner countries, and the credit will be shared between Japan and the partner countries. In Indonesia, there are some projects already implementing in these JCM schemes. Next slide. Yes, in Gundi CCS project, feasibility study is ongoing. Next. As well as the Squati CCS project. Those feasibility studies are conducted by Japanese companies. Next slide, please. At the end of my presentation, let me explain the Japanese companies and the Japanese government-related organization works for the Indonesian net zero target. This map shows various projects in Indonesia by Japanese companies, starting from CCUS, marked with red circle. But not only the CCUS, but also there are so many solar, hydro, geothermal, ammonia, and other projects all around Indonesia. We, JETRO, and the Jakarta Japan Club, Chamber of Commerce of Japanese companies in Indonesia, specified 340 projects around Indonesia so far. However, more and more projects will be implemented in Indonesia for the future. So we will update this map time by time. Next slide, please. Not only Japanese companies, but also Japanese government-related institutions working hard to contribute to Indonesian net zero target. We, JETRO, are working very hard, but JOGMEC, Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Corporation, implementing research and development and the support of the CCS project. And NEDO, New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, supporting the research and development in this sector. Next slide, please. As a part of our effort, we, JETRO, Jakarta office, published the business catalog by Japanese companies for decarbonization realization in Indonesia last week. We picked up the Japanese companies' technology which can be utilized not only Japanese companies in Indonesia, but also Indonesian companies. So there are 18 technologies so far, and one of them is a CCS technology by JGC Corporation. Next slide, please. Yes. This catalog will also be evolving. So we are asking other Japanese companies to submit those kind of technologies in this catalog. Yes, next slide. Yes, this is the end of my presentation, and thank you again for inviting this event. Terima kasih banyak. Mau bisnis ku JETRO dulu. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih. Big round of applause to Matsuda-san, who share about this is another level of cooperation. I think the three speakers talk about companies and regulation, but this last speaker, Matsuda-san, share about the cooperation, international cooperation among countries, which is also another critical part of solving this problem together. And I think I read it's a fine print in the middle of one of the slides that I somehow just drawn attention to, is that there is a belief in Japanese government that the world without oil and gas is not realistic. I think that's very critical. I think I saw some of the younger crowd, early career crowd that's starting into in the industry. Don't worry, it is not realistic that the world will be without oil and gas for quite a long time. So believe me, you don't choose the wrong industry. You are here, okay, be fine, and we'll continue to be here as long as we can have that third leg of being lower carbon. So it's still going to be affordable, reliable, and lower carbon as well. So appreciate the discussion. So now, well, another one. All speakers actually was on time. So last night I was dreaded, how as a moderator, how can I cut off someone from in the middle of the speech, I feel like, what happened if Pak Tetuko runs off, time? Can I politely ask him to stop? Maybe not. It's called career limiting move. So actually we have quite a number of questions already coming in. So I'll actually start with that question from the audience. This one, the first one is coming in from Anthony on Moiko Oil Exploration Company. This one is addressed to Pak Professor, Pak Dirjen. There has been a single regulation, has not been a single regulation on CCS, and it is estimated that more than 90% of potential geological CO2 storage for CCS could be found in saline formation outside petroleum work area, wilayah kerja WK Megas. Which ministry is in charge of that saline formation outside WK? When is CCS regulation expected to be issued? And what's next after the issuance of such regulation? Go ahead, Pak.
Thank you. The draft is finished from our ministry and has submitted to related institution. This is the law ministry. And what they do what we call it by harmonization. It means that they will have a kind of big meeting with many different ministries and make sure that this ministerial regulation is not conflicting with other regulations. So that's the step. So, and it's beyond our control. So, but usually, if we have such important and the first priority, then we will endorse through the coordinating minister. Okay, and hopefully, I do hope that this year will be issued, will publish the ministerial regulation. So we're trying to pursue that. Hopefully, we can announce during the G20. That will be very good. But right now, we're pursuing that. And then and then after that, we will do the details, the derivative of that ministerial regulation. Of course, we can draft ministerial decrees for that, and meanings that after the ministerial regulation, there is a ministerial decree in more focus and narrow scope and more details implementation. So I think we still need that. And for the second question, this ministerial regulation is kind of, still open for collaboration, international cooperation. But the policies currently, the priority will be for CO2 sources in domestic in Indonesia. So for the oil companies here, that we will give priority to your fields first in order to maintain the CO2 emissions and to be injected into reservoirs. Then by having that, we can say to the world that we care to our domestic emissions first. That's important for us. Even though we do not close for the international cooperation, we still open for the cooperation. But for the time being, that's the first priority. Meaning that we need to know first, can we do it safely and for a certain period of time, and will be manageable, of course, maybe profitable first for the oil companies. So we have to make sure that we can manage it for the domestic needs first. And sure, in the future, in the near future maybe, and if we can cooperate together and we prove it that works well, then it is open to other opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, terima kasih. Maybe just a follow-up from me on that question. I think Putreshi also mentioned that one part of that critical part of solving those $4 trillion question is really having cooperation and even cross-border. So Pak Tetuka, you're saying that this current ministry regulation, which kind of in its own WK, and then, but probably in the second stage or third stage later on, that type of cross-border is going to be open as well. Terima kasih, Pak. Next question is actually going to Pak Budiman. Pak Rusip, I think the audience here, when you presented a lot of cooperation, a lot of partnership for the different companies, and certainly one of them is MOU with Chevron, Pak. Don't forget about it. So and then there is this probably the most advanced is in the, as you mentioned, is the Gundi and Salawati, and in the Gundi, Sukawati, sorry, not Salawati, sorry, maaf. What will be needed to move that pilot project in Gundi to full-scale project? That's it. And then can you share the good news so far? You know, what you learned, what's good from what this early stage, and then share with us and learn on the commercial perspective and technology perspective. Pak Budiman.
Thank you very much for the questions. So yes, I mean, we are finalizing our studies now in those areas in Gundi and Sukawati. And then we are now talking with our partners to move on the next stages. In Sukowati, the next stages is that, of course, I mean, we'll be doing some pilot tests, yeah, as such that we will test the injectivity, for example, technicality, and also to see the impact of injecting the CO2 into the reservoir, into the depleted reservoir. And also we will study that and we will learn from that. And after the pilot project, we will know later on what so-called a proof of expandability. I mean, full scale will need a lot of investment. So we need to be very careful before we investing a lot of capital, that we need to learn from the pilot project. While we are doing injectivity tests also in Jatibarang, and we will do that this year, and to see that the impact of injecting the CO2 into the reservoir. So the injection that we'll be doing, we call that half and puff. We'll inject, and then we will wait, and then we'll produce, and see, I mean, how we can get some recovery from the one well. So there are still a lot of things that need to be done. And for the Sukowati, for example, our plan is that the full scale will be in year 2030, 2031. So there are still a lot of things to do, and we also need to wait for the regulation from Pak Tutuka, so that we understand later on, you know, how the PSC terms and conditions can be implemented, or what need to be changed, amendment of the current PSC terms and conditions, as such that we can have this CCUS or CCS project commercially viable. So we need to work with our stakeholders, our partners, and also the government on, especially with the Ministry of ESDM on this implementation plan. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih Pak Budiman. There are other questions, but I'm throwing an audible, so I'll ask my question to probably Pak Matsuda-san. You mentioned discussion about the joint crediting of carbon, I guess. And can you elaborate a little bit more on how it works? And I think there was a discussion, will that success of that hinge on the establishment of carbon tax that's competitive as well as carbon credit situation? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. About the joint crediting mechanism is based on the UNFCCC Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. The scheme starts from the Japan side, lead the decarbonizing technologies, such as CCS technologies, and the reduction, carbon emission reduction will be implemented in the partner countries. And this implementation, operation and management is observed by the joint committee from both sides, Japan and partner countries. And after the implementation, the credit obtained from the reduction is shared with Japan and partner companies. So far, Japan have 22 partner countries, and 66 projects are implementing, including Indonesia. The sector is varied from not only CCS, but also the solar and other sectors. The Japanese government will promote this kind of joint crediting mechanism and other international cooperation to reduce carbon dioxide emission worldwide. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Terima kasih Matsuda-san. Maybe a question from Tracy, it's coming from Bayu from Technics Energy. You discuss about sort of the the business case for carbon. I guess the question here is that how expensive that carbon credit or carbon tax needs to be to make it viable in your estimation currently.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think the question starts talking about the range and how expensive CCS is. I think that itself needs to be looked at in the context of all the solutions to lower the carbon footprint. And as targets are set and there's increasing ambition, it's a relative question. You know, CCS is, you could say it's expensive, but how does it stack relative to the other forms of decarbonisation at scale today? That's why we see it as being possible today. The revenue mechanisms are important, which is why I wanted to highlight how hydrogen, blue hydrogen in particular, low carbon products fit in, because you can use the pore space for sequestering the CO2. You can also see it as a means to create low carbon products. And so there's different markets that need to be created, and as the use of hydrogen increases in our economies, then blue hydrogen is a very cost-effective step. Obviously, there's other steps needed to move forward into green hydrogen projects, but on a relative cost and positioning, it's understanding what's right for each of the countries and consumers. In terms of the carbon, price question, we do believe as a company that a carbon price is going to be a useful mechanism to enable more and more projects to decarbonise. The importance of understanding regionally how that's going to work in Asia Pacific is important. That's why I think the work in Japan around the alliance is extremely important, such that we can position that value of carbon, even if there is differential, carbon pricing in the region to really activate projects. But I guess, the short answer is there's many different revenue mechanisms, and seeing the CCS project as an enabler for those. And it's why the partnerships are so important, to understand who needs to work together to activate a project with its unique set of circumstances.
Thank you. I think one more question for Matsuda-san. I think you mentioned about the $10 billion allocated for low carbon project. There is a question here from the audience from Mbak Cindy. In what form is that the government Japan? I guess the question how much can we get that part of that here in projects and other things?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. The fund I mentioned is not a subsidy, direct subsidy from the Japanese government, but the Japanese government related to financial institutions such as JBIC or NEXI or other private financial institutions will provide to invest or to lend the revenue to the companies implementing the project for contributing the carbon emission reduction. So that's my answer. Yeah. Okay.
Terima kasih. I guess the committee said the time is up, so maybe just take a minute to wrap up. Certainly appreciate very much the different viewpoints, different vantage point, very holistic discussion, and certainly what I concluded here from hearing all the conversation and answer to the question is that, being lower carbon is a license to operate for us. I don't think we can dispute that. We just have to be able to accept that. That is a certainty. And CCUS certainly, and CCS is going to be how we stay competitive with, stay relevant in the world, and how can we lower the carbon and in places where the carbonization is very difficult. And I think the third conclusion I heard from you all is that clearly collaboration is the key between companies, sharing experience, working together, and between countries, because this is really our problem, not somebody else's problem. This is really our problem, and how can we collaborate together to overcome this challenge and not only survive, but really thrive in this new world of lower carbon. So again, appreciate very much for attending, appreciate everybody for the questions. And then once again, please give a big round of applause to the 4 speakers.
Thank you very much, moderator Bapak Wahyu Budiarto. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a presentation of mementos as a token of our sincere appreciation and gratitude to our panelists and moderator. Mr. Gary Selby, IPA board, will present the mementos. Our gratitude and appreciation to all panelists. Mr. Matsuda Akihisa, thank you very much. Ibu Tracy Lotian. Bapak Budiman, thank you very much. Professor Tutuka. And moderator, Bapak Wahyu Budiarto. Thank you very much. Please pose together for a photograph. Thank you very much. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Kita kasih tepuk tangan, Bapak Ibu sekalian, untuk sesi ini. Ya, terima kasih. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to inform you that at 11 a.m., the C-Talk will be held at the Assembly Hall. Prominent panelists from several companies will be discussing about company strategy to address energy transition and investment. And the plenary session 3 in this plenary hall will be held at 1:30 p.m. The session will begin with a keynote speech from the National Energy Council, and lunch will be served for you at noon at the Cendrawasih Hall. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Our story began with a dream to see if we could take on an industry. It wasn't easy, but slowly, good began to happen. We put our name on the map. Conquered industries, even ventured into new ones. But could we have done more? As the world produced more energy, it became nature's problem, and we were part of it. An answer was needed to put the world on a more sustainable path. So we gathered our strengths and together started connecting the dots. Our purpose became clear: to become a progressive energy and solutions partner, enriching lives for a sustainable future. To reduce emissions, grow renewable energy, bring education to more, champion social impact, and promote a circular economy. To achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050, we searched for solutions beyond today and found the immense potential in the energy of tomorrow, where oil and gas can find new life, where plastic bottles can move cars, where carbon dioxide can breathe life into machines, where animals and people can live side by side, and where education is an opportunity every child could have. Let's connect the dots together and create a more sustainable future for all, so that our next generation will always have something to look forward to. Petronas, passionate about progress.